The beach house is Sarah's graduation gift, Dad smiled proudly. They'd planned a huge moving party. I checked my phone as the trust activated. The security codes changed automatically. It was a Sunday in late June, the kind of morning that feels staged. The restaurant my father had chosen was the sort of place where brunch menus were printed on heavy cardstock, and mimosas came in flutes. Everything about the morning had been choreographed. The private dining room, the white peonies in the centerpiece that I knew cost $240 because my mother had mentioned it 3 times that week, the cake near the window with Sarah's name piped in pale gold frosting, the seating arranged so Sarah was directly across from my father, at the center of the frame. I had arrived 11 minutes early because I always arrive early to things I'm anxious about. It gives me time to settle into the room before the room fills with people. I sat at my assigned place. I could tell it was mine because it was the one without a place card, which is its own kind of statement. And I ordered coffee and looked at the white tablecloths and the peonies and the cake, and I thought about my grandmother. The family arrived in clusters. My mother came in first with Aunt Diane, deep in a conversation about the renovation timeline for the beach house that had apparently already been underway for 2 weeks. They had already discussed tile. My mother wanted something called Calicotta marble, and Aunt Diane thought the existing tile was fine and just needed to be regrouted. And this was the debate that carried them through the door and across the room to their seats. A debate sparked by a gift that had not yet been officially given. My brother Chris arrived next, alone, slightly rumpled, tie slightly crooked, looking like a person who had dressed in a hurry as a personality choice. He dropped into the seat next to mine and stole a piece of bread from the basket and said, "Big day," in the tone of someone who finds big days mildly exhausting. "Big day," I agreed. "You okay?" "Fine," I said, and I meant it in the way that people mean it when they are fine in a specific sense, even if not in the general ambient one. My father arrived with Sarah. He had picked her up from her apartment, a gesture that in our family means an occasion is serious. He had a new suit on. Sarah was wearing a cream-colored wrap dress and the kind of low heels that look effortless and cost a significant amount of money. She looked beautiful. She often looks beautiful. This is one of the things about Sarah that I learned very early to hold without resentment. It is simply true, the same way the weather is true. They came through the door and the room shifted. Not dramatically, just slightly. The way a compass needle shifts when you bring a magnet near it. My mother stood up. Aunt Diane made a sound of delight. Chris straightened his tie an inch. I picked up my coffee cup with both hands. Sarah looked around the room with an expression I had seen before. The quiet satisfaction of someone arriving at a place that has been prepared for them. Not arrogance, exactly. Just certainty. The certainty of someone who has never had much reason to doubt that rooms would be prepared. "She looks incredible," my mother said. "She does," I agreed, because she did. My father guided her to her seat with a hand at the small of her back, and then he looked around the table at all of us with an expression that was so nakedly proud and happy that I found I could not be irritated by it. He loved Sarah in a way that was total and uncomplicated, and it was not his fault that he loved me differently. It was just true. "Thank you all for coming," he said. "This is a big day for our family." I checked my phone under the table. 10:47 in the morning. 1 hour and 13 minutes until noon. My family is not unusual in any of the ways that matter. My father built something from not very much, which is genuinely admirable, and which he knows is admirable, and which has made him generous in some directions and blind in others. He grew up modestly, in a family that expressed ambition primarily through silence on the subject of failure and loud enthusiasm for success. My mother's parents were different. Her father had immigrated at 22 with almost nothing and built, over 30 years, a small restaurant into a commercial real estate portfolio of meaningful size. He was not a man who talked about money. He had seen what the open discussion of money did to families, cousins fighting over things their parents had not yet finished building, and he had decided early that he would protect his family from that corruption by being quietly competent rather than publicly wealthy. What this meant, practically, was that none of his children or grandchildren had a precise understanding of what he was worth. We knew they were comfortable. We knew that when my grandfather took the extended family to restaurants, he paid without discussion and without making a performance of it. But the actual numbers were private, held close, visible only in their effects. What I know now, and what I knew from the age of 15, is that by the time my grandfather died, the portfolio was substantial. He had not built it to enjoy it. He had built it to pass it on. The question was how. I was 15 years old the summer my grandmother got sick. It was not the dramatic, sudden kind of sick that arrives with clear narrative purpose. It was the slow kind, a shorter walk in the afternoon, a longer nap, meals that took more energy to finish, the kind of sick that a certain type of person manages by managing the perception of it. My grandmother did not tell us she was dying. She told us she was tired. I was spending that summer at her house, as I did most summers during that period, because my parents traveled in June and July, and the alternative, staying with Aunt Diane, was fine but loud in quantities a summer requires. My grandmother's house was quiet, large and quiet, and organized with the precision of people who have had decades to develop their systems. The kitchen had yellow curtains that she had sewn herself in 1974 and never replaced because she could see no reason to. I spent those mornings reading on the back porch while she gardened, and the afternoons we cooked together, or drove to the farmer's market, or watched old films in the den, and in the evenings she made tea and we sat at the kitchen table under the yellow curtains and talked. She was the kind of person who was interested in what you thought, specifically, not just in whether you were happy. She asked questions that required real answers. Talking to her felt like being taken seriously, which was not something I experienced in great abundance during that period of my life. It was on a Tuesday evening in late July that she told me about the trust. I had not been expecting it. We had been talking about a book I was reading, some novel about a family that made bad decisions across generations, and she had said something about how families very often make bad decisions without realizing they're making them, which seems like wisdom in retrospect, but which I registered at the time as an observation rather than a preface. She poured me a second cup of coffee. She had given me coffee at her kitchen table since I was 13, which was a thing my mother did not know about, and which I had understood even then was a form of respect. And she folded her hands and she said, "I need to tell you about something. Not because it will affect your life immediately, but because it should affect how you think about the future, and you are old enough now to think about the future." She had a particular way of speaking that made statements feel formal without being cold, like something was being recorded for the record. She told me about the trust. In 1991, she and my grandfather had established a family trust to hold all their real estate assets: the beach house, the mountain cabin, the commercial properties downtown. A corporate trustee managed everything. The family used the properties freely, but they did not own them in any practical sense. The succession condition was specific. Upon the 30th birthday of the eldest grandchild, full control would transfer to that grandchild as sole trustee and primary beneficiary. My grandmother looked at me across the yellow-curtained kitchen and said, "That is you, Natalie. In 15 years." I was 15 years old. 15 years felt like a distance I could not see across. She said, "I am telling you now because I want you to have time to understand it, to prepare. I also want to tell you while I am still able to explain it myself, rather than leaving you to figure it out from documents." I asked her why she had not told my father. She was quiet for a moment. Not the kind of quiet that means she doesn't have an answer, but the kind that means she is deciding which part of the answer to give. "Your father," she said finally, "is a good man who makes generous decisions, sometimes too generous, and sometimes with things that are not entirely his to give. Your grandfather and I talked about this for a long time. We decided the trust needed to go to someone with patience." She looked at me steadily. "You have always had patience, Natalie. Even as a small child, you were the one who waited." She gave me 3 letters before she passed, and the attorney's name. She told me to contact him, to review the documents, to find a financial advisor I trusted. Not a family friend, but a professional I chose independently. Then she said, "Don't tell anyone. Not yet. Not until it's time." She died 9 months later, in April, which was not a surprise by then, though it remained a great sadness. She had the kind of death that feels right, in the specific narrow sense that it happened in her own house, in the room she chose, having arranged everything she wanted to arrange. At the funeral, standing in the back of the church in my good black dress, I thought about the yellow curtains and the kitchen table and the attorney's card in my fireproof box, and I felt the weight of what she had put in my hands, and I understood for the first time what patience actually costs. The first letter arrived on my 18th birthday, delivered by certified mail from the estate attorney's office. Cream-colored envelope. My grandmother's careful handwriting inside, dating itself from 3 years before I was reading it. A strange thing, like a transmission from another time. She wrote about the trust in detail, the properties, the corporate trustee structure, how to contact the attorney. She told me to find a financial advisor I trusted, not a family friend, but a professional I chose independently. At the end, she wrote, "I know this is a great deal to carry, and I know you did not ask for it, but I also know you are the right person for it. You see things clearly, you always have." I called the attorney the next day. He had been expecting my call. I spent that following summer reading trust documents. The second letter came at 25, shorter. She told me to retain a trust and estates litigator, not the estate administrator, but someone who could confirm the succession clause was enforceable under current law. She reiterated that I should tell no one before the activation date. She ended with, "You may have been tempted to tell someone by now." Carrying a secret for years is difficult, particularly when you are watching decisions being made around you that the secret would clarify. But disclosing this before the right time will only create opportunities to complicate the plan. Please trust me. I knew this family. She was right. There had been moments, a Christmas when my father had floated the idea of converting the cabin to a rental to fund Sarah's MBA, which would have required modifying trust assets that were not his to touch, when I had nearly said something. I held my tongue. He didn't pursue it, but it had been a close thing. The third letter came 6 weeks before my 30th birthday. A single handwritten page. "It's yours now. Protect it. The family will resist, and some will be angry, and some will make you feel you have done something wrong. You have not done something wrong. You have done something right. Stand firm. I love you, and I am proud of you. Please take care of the yellow curtains. I'd like them to stay." There were no yellow curtains at the beach house. I have always thought she meant something else by it. I have never been entirely sure what. I want to be clear about something before I go further, because I think it matters for understanding the particular shape of what happened on that Sunday in June. I do not think my parents are bad people. I do not think my father's favoritism towards Sarah is the product of malice. It is the product of something more complicated and probably more common. The way love sometimes takes the path of least resistance, the way it flows toward brightness and warmth and ease, and the way a child who is easy to delight gives a parent more opportunities to feel like a good parent, which is its own kind of feedback loop. Sarah has always been easy to delight. She has a quality of enthusiasm that is genuinely contagious. She experiences things vividly, and she expresses that experience outwardly. When she was happy, the room was brighter. When she was unhappy, the room was aware of it. She was never a malicious child. She simply occupied a great deal of space, and I occupied less. And over time, the family arranged itself around those two gravitational centers in ways that felt natural to everyone except, occasionally, me. I have a specific memory from when I was 11 and Sarah was 6. It was my birthday. My parents had arranged a small party at home, 6 of my school friends, a chocolate cake. Sarah, who had been put to bed bed before the party started because she was 6, appeared at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, and refused to come down because she wanted to be part of it. The next 25 minutes were devoted to managing this situation while my chocolate cake sat on the table and my 6 school friends looked at the floor. Nobody apologized afterward. I don't think it occurred to anyone that an apology was necessary. Sarah had wanted something and had expressed that want loudly, and the situation had been managed, which was how situations involving Sarah were generally handled. This is not one story. This is the shape of a great many years. By the time I was in high school, I had developed a working theory of my own family. I was the one who managed things, not dramatically or visibly, but in the daily quiet way of the person who makes sure the right present gets ordered, who notices when someone looks tired at a family dinner and adjusts the conversation, who absorbs the weight of the room so the room can feel light. I had learned to take up less space because less space was what the room required of me, and I had performed this function with such consistency that I think my family had forgotten it was a performance and come to believe it was simply my nature. My grandmother saw through this. I think that was part of why she trusted me. She had watched me for 15 years and seen both what I was and what I was being asked to be, and she had decided that the former was substantial enough to be trusted with something real. It is a particular kind of recognition, being seen by someone who matters. It stays. I went to a state university 2 hours from home and studied finance, completing my degree in 4 years with honors, noted with modest pride at the dinner table, and not much spoken of again. Sarah, 4 years later, attended a private university on the other side of the country, which generated considerably more conversation, both before and during and after. After graduation, I moved to the city where I still live and found work at a mid-sized investment management firm. I was promoted 3 times in 5 years. I am not telling this as a boast. It is simply context for what my life looked like during the years when the trust was accumulating in the background. I built a life that was genuinely mine, a small apartment I paid for, a set of friendships that had survived the ordinary attrition of adult life, a career that required something real and gave something real back. I also found a financial advisor, independently, as my grandmother had advised, who had been reviewing the trust documents with me annually since I was 25. By my 28th birthday, I had a complete picture of the trust, its composition, income, liabilities, management costs, and projected value at the activation date. I had retained the trust and estates attorney at my grandmother's suggestion and confirmed the succession clause was ironclad. The corporate trustee had confirmed the timeline. In all the years this had been developing, 15 years from the kitchen table to the activation date, I had not said a word to anyone in my family except my grandmother, who was dead. Sarah received her MBA in May, 6 weeks before the brunch. The graduation itself was a production. My parents flew across the country for the ceremony. There were photos and dinners and what my mother described as a celebration weekend involving a hotel and a spa and considerable expense. I sent Sarah a card and a gift card to a bookstore. She thanked me in a text message with a smiley face. The beach house had been discussed in the family for years as a vague eventual possibility. Sarah loves the coast. Sarah could use a base for her career. Imagine what she'd do with the right space. And I had watched this conversation develop over several family gatherings with the particular attention of someone who knows what the other people in the room do not. My father had gradually talked himself into a plan that was not within his authority to execute, building the logic of it in installments so that by the time he arrived at the decision, it felt inevitable rather than impulsive. He had promised her the beach house before her graduation, in a phone call I was not part of, but which my mother mentioned in passing with a satisfied tone of someone who considers generosity a virtue independent of its source. Dad is giving Sarah the beach house, my mother had said. Isn't that wonderful? She's going to do such beautiful things with it. I said, that's a significant thing to promise. My mother looked at me with the particular expression she sometimes uses when she thinks I am being needlessly complicated about something that should be simple. It's a family property, she said. We've always used it as a family. This was true in the same way that many things are true, accurately in one sense and meaningfully incomplete in another. In February, 4 months before the brunch, I sent my father an email. I kept it short and non-alarmist because I did not want to cause a crisis before it was necessary, and because I knew that my father's response to things that felt like crises was to defer them until they became someone else's problem, which was precisely the dynamic I was trying to interrupt. I wrote that I wanted to flag something about the family properties that he should be aware of before making any long-term commitments. I explained that the Coastal Properties Trust had a succession clause activating on my upcoming birthday, and that he should review the trust documentation before making any formal promises about trust assets. I included the estate attorney's name and suggested he call. He did not respond. I sent a follow-up 3 weeks later. He did not respond to that either. At Thanksgiving, I found a moment when he and I were alone in the kitchen, and I said carefully, "Did you get a chance to look into the trust thing I emailed you about?" He looked at me with the slightly unfocused expression of a person who is not sure what you are referring to. "What trust thing?" "I sent you an email in February about the Coastal Properties Trust, the succession clause." "I get a lot of emails," he said. "I'll look into it." He did not look into it. I made a note in my records. I had been keeping records since consulting the trusts and estates attorney about my obligations during the transition period. She had advised me to document all attempts to inform relevant parties. I had documented every one. I had done what I could. I had tried, twice in writing and once in person. He had filed the emails and continued planning a party for a gift he did not have the authority to give. This was not my fault. It was, however, going to be my problem. The evening before the brunch, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and the trust trust documents open on my laptop and went through the timeline one more time. Not because I didn't know it, but because knowing something and sitting with it are different activities, and both are necessary before a large thing. The activation would occur at noon on my birthday. The corporate trustee had confirmed this in a letter the previous month. The security codes for the digital property management system would update automatically. My attorney would send a confirmation text. I have always been good at determining how I feel about things when I give myself the time to do it. The skill requires being willing to look at an uncomfortable thing without flinching, without dressing it up in language that makes it more palatable. What I felt was this. I was genuinely sad that the situation had come to a confrontation. I had not wanted that. I had wanted a conversation, one that my father and I could have had in February, or at Thanksgiving, or at any point in the preceding years if he had ever asked me about the trust or the administrative communications he had been filing unread. I had wanted someone in my family to ask. Nobody had. Underneath the sadness was something I could only call resolve. My grandmother had told me to stand firm. She had known this family more completely than anyone and had spent years planning for exactly this kind of moment. I was going to hold the line. I closed the laptop at 10:30. I slept, not perfectly, but enough. The private dining room was separated from the main restaurant floor by frosted glass doors that muffled the sound from outside. There were 12 people at the table. My parents, my brother Chris, Aunt Diane, and her husband, 2 of my mother's cousins, my father's college friend and his wife who were visiting for the weekend, Sarah and me. The table was oval, covered in white linen, with the peonies in the center and small menus in leather folders at each place. The first hour and a half was the ordinary substance of family occasions. Food ordered and delivered, wine chosen, conversations overlapping in the way of large family tables where everyone is talking at slightly different volumes about slightly different things. My father told a story about a business trip. Aunt Diane and my mother continued their tile discussion. Chris ate bread and listened more than he spoke, which is his usual mode. The 2 cousins talked to each other about something I couldn't hear. Sarah was luminous in the way that people are luminous when they are the center of an occasion they have been anticipating. She laughed easily and asked questions and touched people's arms when they said things she found charming. She talked about her plans. Not the beach house yet, not formally, just the house in the careful way of someone who knows the reveal is coming and is holding the shape of the gift in the air, and her plans for her career, the new job, the clients she was looking forward to working with. She did not ask me about my work. She rarely does. I ate my eggs and drank my coffee and watched the clock. At 11:30, my father stood up and clinked his glass. The table settled. I want to say something, he said. I want to say that I am incredibly proud of this young woman. He gestured towards Sarah with the expression of a man delivering a well-rehearsed speech, which he was. She has worked hard for 4 years and earned something that matters, and your mother and I wanted to mark the occasion in a way that was equal to what she's accomplished. Sarah looked at him with wide, expectant eyes. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and produced a key ring. He held it up. The keys caught the light. The beach house, he said, smiling, is Sarah's graduation gift. The table erupted in the particular way family tables erupt when something large and shiny has been announced. Exclamations, tears from my mother, applause from the cousins, Aunt Diane saying she knew it, she had known for months. Sarah put her hands over her mouth, a gesture I believed was genuine. She looked genuinely overwhelmed, which was moving even to me, even knowing what I knew. She stood up and hugged my father for a long time. I can't believe it, she said. I can't believe you're giving me the beach house. It's yours, he said. Go do something beautiful with it. My phone was face down on the table. I left it face down. 11:43, 17 minutes. Chris next to me leaned over and said quietly, "You okay?" "Fine," I said. "She's happy," he said. "She is," I said. There was a pause. Chris is someone who notices things without making a production of noticing them. He looked at me for a moment longer than was strictly necessary, and then he picked up his water glass. The table conversation shifted to logistics. The moving party planned for the following Saturday, the renovation timeline, the furniture Sarah was planning to bring. My mother had already researched local contractors. Aunt Diane had opinions about the deck. Sarah was on her phone, showing someone the keys. I watched all of this. I thought about my grandmother at her kitchen table with the yellow curtains. I thought about the attorney's card in my fireproof box. I thought about 15 years of letters and documents and quarterly reports and a single handwritten page that said, "Stand firm." At 11:58, I excused myself and went to the restroom. I stood at the sink and ran cold water over my wrists, which I do when I need to think clearly. Then I walked back through the restaurant and through the frosted glass doors, and I sat down at my place at the oval table, and I waited. At noon, my phone vibrated twice in quick succession. The first text was from my attorney. "Transfer complete. All properties now under your authority. Confirmed by corporate trustee. Your grandparents' wishes have been honored." The second was a formal notification from the estate attorney's office with documentation of the transfer attached. I did not open it. I put my phone face down on the table and picked up my coffee cup and drank what remained, which was cold. My father's phone rang 47 seconds later. I counted the seconds because I was watching him. He looked at the screen. His face did a complicated thing. First, the mild irritation of an interrupted occasion, then confusion as he processed who was calling, then a more particular kind of attention. He said something to my mother, excused himself, and walked toward the frosted glass doors. I watched him through the glass. He was standing in the hallway, phone to his ear, not moving. His free hand went to the back of his neck. He had his eyes on the floor. The call lasted 4 minutes and 20 seconds. When he came back through the frosted glass doors, he did not sit down immediately. He stood at the edge of the table with one hand resting on the back of his chair, and he looked around around the table in a way that made the conversation slow and then stop. There is a quality of attention that stops rooms, and he had it in that moment. Then he looked at me. "Natalie," he said, "can I speak with you for a moment, privately?" Sarah looked up from her phone. Chris put down his bread. My mother's expression shifted toward alarm. "Of course," I said. We went to the corner of the room near the hostess stand, far enough from the table that conversation would not carry. His voice when he spoke was low and careful, a man trying to maintain control of a situation he does not yet fully understand. "That was the trust administrator," he said. "He called to notify me that the Coastal Properties Trust has been activated and that the primary trustee authority has transferred. He said you are now the controlling party." A pause. "He seemed to think I already knew." "I tried to tell you," I said. "In February. The email. And at Thanksgiving." He looked at me. There was something in his expression I had not seen before. Not anger, but something adjacent to it, mixed with the particular discomfort of a person realizing they have been wrong in a way that required them to have been wrong for a long time. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "Since I was 15, I said. "Grandma told me. The summer before she died." He absorbed this. I watched him process the mathematics of it. 15 years. My entire adult life. Every family gathering, every conversation about the properties, every casual comment about what should be done with the beach house, every moment when I had sat at family tables with this knowledge in my chest and said nothing. "She told you, and she didn't tell me," he said. "It was not quite a question. She trusted me to manage it," I said. "She didn't trust me." His voice was quiet, not accusing, just recognizing. I did not say what my grandmother had actually said about him, because it would not have helped and it was not necessary. I said, "She knew you loved this family. She also knew the properties needed someone with a particular kind of patience. Those things aren't incompatible." He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked back at the table through the frosted glass, the oval of white linen, the peonies, Sarah still with the keys in her hand, my mother talking to Aunt Diane, the ordinary ongoing surface of a family occasion. "The beach house," he said, "is a trust asset," I said. "It has always been a trust asset. It generates approximately $75,000 annually in rental income after expenses, which goes back into the trust. It has never been a family property in the way you've been treating it." I promised her. "You promised her something that wasn't yours to promise," I said, not cruelly, just clearly. "I tried to give you the opportunity to know that before you made the promise. I couldn't make you read the email." He put his hand on the back of his neck again, the gesture of a man who is tired. "What happens now?" he asked. "I manage the trust according to the terms my grandparents set. The properties are maintained and rented. Family members can use them at the family rate, the same arrangement that has always existed. Sarah can use the beach house. She just needs to book it through the property manager. She thinks it's hers." "I know." A silence. "She's going to be devastated," he said. "I know that too." He stood there for another moment. Then he straightened slightly and turned toward the table and pushed through the frosted glass doors and walked back to his seat and stood behind his chair, and the table went quiet. "There's been a complication," he said. The silence that followed those 4 words had a texture to it. I have been in rooms where bad news arrived, and the silence has a particular quality, depending on what the people in the room already feared. This silence was the silence of people who had not feared anything, who had been in the middle of champagne and peonies and plans for deck renovations, and who were therefore entirely unprepared. Sarah looked at my father. Then she looked at me. She had good instincts, whatever else might be said. She understood in an instant that I was the complication. "What complication?" she said. Her voice was steady. "I will give her that." My father sat down. He was choosing his words. "The beach house is part of a family trust," he said. "A trust your grandparents established. I wasn't aware the trust had specific succession terms." He paused. "Natalie is now the controlling trustee." "What does that mean?" Sarah said. "It means the property transfer I described isn't something I had the authority to arrange. I was promising something that was not mine to give." Sarah looked at me again. The look was not warm. "You knew," she said, not a question. "Yes," I said. "How long?" "Since I was 15, Grandma told me." I watched Sarah process this with the particular efficiency of someone who is very angry and is managing it in real time. She still had the keys in her hand. I noticed her grip tighten. "So you sat there," she said, slowly, carefully, "while Dad announced it, while everyone celebrated. You sat there and said nothing." "I tried to tell Dad in February," I said, "and at Thanksgiving. He didn't read the emails." My father made a sound that was not quite a word. "That's not," Sarah started. "It is," I said. "I have the sent emails. I have a record of the Thanksgiving conversation. I did not ambush anyone." My mother, who had been very still, said, "Natalie, can't we figure this out? It's family. Surely the trust allows you to." "The trust has specific restrictions on how properties can be distributed," I said. "I can't gift them outright. They have to be managed for the benefit of all current and future family members. That's not a choice I made. That's what the trust says." "But you're the trustee," Sarah said. "Isn't there something you can do?" "There is something I can do," I said. "I can manage the properties responsibly. I can make sure they're maintained and generating income. I can make them available to family members under fair terms. That's what I'm going to do." "That's not what I asked," she said. "No," I agreed. "It's not." There was a period of time, I would estimate 20 minutes, though it felt longer, during which the brunch became something other than a brunch. Voices were raised, then lowered, then raised again. My mother cried twice, briefly. Aunt Diane asked questions in a tone that suggested she was trying to understand rather than intervene. Chris sat very still and said very little, which is his mode in difficult situations, and which I have always respected. My father's college friend and his wife quietly ordered more coffee and studied the window. Sarah said things that were hurtful, which I expected and had prepared for. She used the word power trip. She used the word controlling. She said that my grandmother had clearly lost trust her judgment in her final years to have trusted this level of responsibility to someone who would use it this way. This last one landed harder than the others because it involved my grandmother, and my grandmother is not here to respond. I held the things she said the way you hold a very hot hand, carefully with the awareness that it will hurt if you grip it, setting it down as quickly as you can without dropping it. What I did not do was apologize. I had thought about this the night before. Apology would be both dishonest and harmful. Dishonest because I had done nothing wrong, and harmful because it would create the impression that the situation was negotiable in a way that it was not. My grandmother had spent 15 years setting this up. I was not going to begin my tenure as trustee by apologizing for the terms of the trust. What I said, when the conversation reached a kind of exhausted pause, was this: I understand this is not what you were expecting today. I'm sorry Dad made a promise without the information he needed to make it. I'm not sorry that I'm honoring my grandmother's wishes. She spent years thinking carefully about this decision. I intend to honor it carefully. Sarah stood up, gathered her things with the composed efficiency of someone who is furious and has decided that remaining is beneath them, and left without saying goodbye to me. My mother followed her. Through the frosted glass, I could see them near the hostess stand, my mother with a hand on Sarah's arm. My father stayed at the table. He was looking at the centerpiece, the white peonies, with an expression I had not seen on him before, something hollowed. You could have made this easier, he said, not accusingly, just as a statement. I tried to, I said. In February. I know. He was quiet for a moment. Your grandmother was right about you. I did not ask him what he meant. I thought I knew, and I thought the knowing was enough. The days after the brunch were not easy, which I had expected, and were also not as bad as they could have been, which I had not fully expected. Sarah did not speak to me for 3 weeks. My mother called the evening of the brunch and left a voicemail that was kind in tone and confused in substance, asking me to think about whether there was some flexibility in the situation. We talked the next day for 40 minutes, and at the end of it, she said, I just want everyone to be okay, which is the thing my mother has always wanted, and which is not always the thing that is available. Chris texted me that evening. 3 words. You did right. My father called 8 days after the brunch. Sunday evening, which is when he makes calls he has been composing for a week. He said his attorney had reviewed the trust documents, confirmed everything. Ironclad. I should have read the email, he said. Yes, I said. I've been thinking about why I didn't. I think part of it was that I didn't expect anything complicated to come from the estate at this point. Your grandparents have been gone so long. I thought those things were settled. He paused. I also think I wasn't paying close enough attention to you. In general, for a long time, I made assumptions about what you had, about what you needed. They weren't accurate. I held the phone and was quiet for a moment. Grandma paid attention, I said finally. Yes, he said. She did. A different kind of silence than the ones at the brunch. This one had more room in it. Sarah is still very upset, he said. I know. I'm not going to undo 15 years of my grandmother's planning because Sarah is angry. I'd like her to understand it eventually. I'm not sure she will. She'll come around, he said, in the uncertain tone of a man who needs to believe it. Maybe, I said. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my own apartment and thought about my grandmother at her kitchen table with the yellow curtains, the way she had looked at me across it and said in 15 years, that's you. I had been 15 years old. The distance had seemed impossible. I was 30 now, and the distance was behind me, and what was in front of me was a portfolio of carefully managed family wealth and the responsibility of protecting it for the people who would come after me, including the children I might have, and the children Sarah might have, and the grandchildren that neither of us could imagine yet. This is not a comfortable position. It is a weighty one. My grandmother had known it would be weighty, and she had chosen me for it anyway, and I intended to be equal to that choice. I opened my laptop and started a new document and wrote at the top of it, Coastal Properties Trust, Year 1. I thought about the yellow curtains. I thought about the last line of the last letter. She would have liked this. The orderly beginning of something. The morning after practicality of a person who has received something large and is getting to work. I started to type. Outside, the city was doing what cities do in the evening. Cars and voices and the ambient sound of people living in proximity. And I was here at my table with my document and the weight of 15 years of trust. And I felt, for the first time in a long time, exactly the right size. Not large, not small, just exactly what I was. Just exactly what she had known I would be.